We're going to talk about el imperativo. El imperativo in English is the imperative. Another way to address this topic is to call it commands. First, we will review the tú commands that you should have learned in Spanish 1. And then we will learn for the first time the usted commands that are going to go more for Spanish 2 and the higher levels of Spanish. So let's start by gaining an understanding of what the imperative is. I put here that el imperativo son órdenes. Órdenes, or orders, or commands, are when you basically boss people around. So this is your unit where you get the license to boss people around a little bit. Sometimes the command might be a little bit mean, like this one, where you say shh, cállate, which means shut up. That's really mean. But that's also a command. You're asking somebody to do something. In this one's a little bit nicer, where you say desplaza hacia abajo. That means scroll down. It's a little bit nicer. And siéntate, which I'm sure you've heard many times, which is sit down. So all of these are different ways that you might command someone. Okay, so it's a lot more than just a suggestion to do something. You're demanding this of them. There are many different groups of people that you might command or boss around. In the first example for tú, this is the one you should be most familiar with. This is a case where you address or you command people that you address by tú. Tú, of course, being the word you, but not just any word you, because actually in this slide there are 3 times we say the word you. There's tú, usted, and ustedes. This particular you is when you're talking to a person that you're really, really familiar with. It's an informal situation. It's like your buddy or your brother and sister, and you're just kind of bossing them around and telling them what to do. So that one is a little bit less formal. However, let's say you want to ask your teacher to do something. You don't want to use the tú form because you're going to sound rude. Instead, you're going to use the usted form. The usted form is more for people you address by last name, or sometimes even, let's say you don't address by last name this person, you just want to sound a little bit more polite. You might want to go with usted. We're not really going to talk about these 2, but I want you to be aware of the fact that there are 2 more forms of commands that you can use if you're commanding a group of people, which would be ustedes, and also if you are commanding a group in which you partake. So you say something like, let's go, and you're included in that. So these last two, ustedes and nosotros and nosotras, we're not really going to address today. Let's just focus on commanding one person for now. There are 2 types of tú commands. So first we're going to start by covering the tú commands and reviewing them, and then we'll move on to usted and make sure you understand them. However, tú, they're a lot more complicated, only because you have to first figure out if what you're saying is an affirmative command or if what you're saying is a negative command. There's a really easy way to remember this. If the command has the word no in it, it's a negative one. If you're telling someone to do something, it's positive, and if you're telling them not to do it, it's negative. So that's easy. Just make sure you know, am I telling them to do it, or am I telling them not to do it? So if I say cierra la puerta, close the door, that's an affirmative command. But if I say no cierres la puerta, don't close the door, I've added the word no in there, I've negated it, therefore it's a negative command. And if you notice how the endings are different. So for tú commands, you're actually going to have to pay attention to whether it's affirmative or negative, and then change your verb accordingly. So let's talk about that really quick. So if it is affirmative and you're telling someone to do something, you're going to use the él, ella, usted form of the verb in the present tense. This is confusing because we are indeed talking to someone we address as tú. However, that is simply how it is done in Spanish. We're going to borrow from the present tense when we use the imperative. So let's say I want to use the verb limpiar, and I've got my little piggy here cleaning his house, and I want to command him to clean the house. I'm asking him to do something, so I'm not saying don't do it. Therefore, it is an affirmative command. The first thing I'm going to do is find the él, ella, usted of the present tense form of that verb. And limpiar, what we would do is drop the AR and add an A for él, ella, usted. And we end up with limpia. So our command could be something like, that's my exclamation point, limpia la casa. Limpia la casa. And there you have it. That's all you have to do. Find the él, ella, usted form and then add some exclamation to it to make it sound like a command. So what I've done on the left is I've cleaned up sort of what we just did, and therefore it should be easier to read and understand the example. But I'm also on the right column over here, I'm going to focus on the negative two commands. So if on the left column we have the affirmative two commands, what do we do for negative? Let's start with AR verbs. So limpiar can be part of our example. Let's say we want to say, don't clean the house. I don't know why we wouldn't want someone to clean our house, but let's just go with the example. And limpiar is an AR verb. What you do for AR verbs is you use the yo form from the present tense of that verb. So limpiar, the yo form is limpio. Now, if you notice, the yo form is always going to have an O, but we're actually going to cross off that O. And when we cross off that O, we're going to add this ending. So our ending for AR verbs, the imperative, negative, tu command, that's a lot to say. So the imperative negative tu command is ES. And what we end up is with limpies. So if you see it now a little bit more cleaned up, it's actually no limpies, don't clean. So in order for us to make it negative, it goes from limpia to limpies. Now let's talk about what if it's an ER-IR. So AR verbs, you add ES once you drop the O from the jo form. For ER and IR verbs, we're going to do the same thing where you drop the O from the jo form, but instead you're going to add AS. And this is where it becomes obvious why it is that we need to first start with the jo form. Because if you remember the verb poner is to put or to set. In this case, I'm going to go with to set the table. So poner, if we put it in the jo form, it's a yogo verb or an irregular jo verb, and the jo form is pongo. So you're going to have to really be attentive to those conjugations when you do this, those jo conjugations. Pongo, if we take off the O, we end up with pong, and we have to add the AS. So no pongas. Let me clean that up for you so it becomes a little easier to read. Here we go. So, no pongas la mesa. So if we could wrap up the affirmative and negative tu commands. For the affirmative, you simply use the él, ella, usted form of the verb. For the negative, however, you first need to find the yo form, get rid of the O's, goodbye O's, and add ES for AR verbs and AS for ER and IR verbs. And this is what you end up with. Now we can move on to, believe it or not, the much easier usted command. So if instead you're in a situation where you want to tell someone to do something, but that person you don't want to offend or you don't want to sound bossy, you are going to want to use the usted command that I'm about to teach you. So for this, we're also going to have to find the yo form of the verb in the present tense. Just like with the negative commands for tu, we are going to get rid of the O's, and these are the endings we're going to add. So for AR, you're going to add an E, and for ER, IR, you're going to add an A. So let's start with mirar. So for mirar, let's say I'm commanding you, and you are someone that I don't want to offend. I'm commanding you to look at something. What I'll do is I'll drop my AR, and I'll add an O for yo, and then from there, I'll drop the O, and add my new ending. Mire. Then for ER and IR, I'm going to look at the verb hacer here for this one. I'm going to find the yo form of the verb, because to do this one, the yo form is an irregular yo, hago. Again, why it's so important to go to the yo form first, otherwise you're going to make a mistake. Hago, then drop the O, and add our new ending, a, haga. And what we end up with, a little bit more cleaned up, would be something like, mire la pantalla, look at the screen, or haga su maleta, pack your bag. So if you're commanding people, you're traveling with someone and you don't want to offend them, this is what you want to say. Of course, with everything that you learn in a language class, there are a few important little considerations that you have to make. So In the usted commands, whenever you are using a verb that ends in car, gar, sar, or car, gar, or zar, so they're not only ar verbs, but before them they have a c, a g, or a z, there's going to be a little special spelling thing that you've got to do, a little step. So anytime you've got a car verb, when you put it in an usted command, the c is going to turn into a qu. If you've got a gar verb, the g, when you put it into the usted command, is going to turn into a gu. And sar, anytime you have a sar verb and you want to put it into a command, you want to turn the z into a c. These are so that we can still maintain the pronunciation of the infinitive form of the verb. So to show you some examples, we take sacar, and I want to tell someone to take something out, and that person is someone I don't want to offend, or I address by last name or whatever. So what I'll do is I'll first put it in the yo form, saco, and because it's a car verb, I've got to be careful that c is going to have to turn into a qu when I add my e for ar. So saque is what I end up with. So for jugar, it's a gar verb, so my g is going to turn into a gu. I first find the yo form, juego. This is extremely important because actually this one ends up being a stem changing verb. So if you didn't put it in the yo form, you wouldn't remember that. So there's the yo form. I'm going to drop the o, and in addition, I have to do that extra spelling change. So you end up with juegue. Juegue. I'm commanding someone to play. Empezar. Now I'm going to command someone to start. It's a zar verb. Again, a few considerations we have to make. First, put it in the yo form. Empiezo. Another stem changing verb that we had to be careful with. So here's our empiezo. And our z is going to have to change to a c because of the fact that it's a zar verb, and I just said that usted commands will cause this to happen. So what you'll end up with is empiece. So something you might say with saque, for example, you might say, saque el pasaporte. Take out your passport. Maybe you're asking someone that you don't know to do this because you need to verify their identification. Or juegue conmigo. Now you're on the airplane and you would like the person next to you to play whatever game you're playing with you. Hopefully you know that person, otherwise it's weird. So juegue conmigo. Or maybe empiece. Empiece a empacar. Why don't you start to pack? Or empiece a hacer la maleta. Start to pack your bags. So same idea, but the point is that the usted command is going to sound a little bit more formal, and if it's a car, gar, zar, you have to make that extra spelling change. Now here's a chart of some examples. I've used the following expressions: llamar a la agente de viajes, recibir la tarjeta de embarque, llegar al aeropuerto a tiempo, and I've plugged them into affirmative tú commands and affirmative usted commands. So I'm keeping this very, very simple. The idea is so you can see how they kind of change. And one special consideration is this right here, because this was a gar verb, therefore the g had to change to a gu. I would pause and write down these examples because in the next slide, you're going to have to do some examples on your own inside of your notes. Here are some examples for you to try on your own. For comprar boletos, first put it in a tú command, then in an usted command. Salir del aeropuerto rápidamente, tú and usted. Pasar por la aduana, and put it in a tú and an usted command. If you want to switch it up and make one or two of the tú ones negative so that you can get the hand of also the negative tú commands and not just affirmative, that's good. But really just give it a good practice of contrasting between the tú form and the usted form in the imperative.